Military pilots were essentially aerial chauffeurs. Their job was to ferry an observer over the countryside to report on troop movements. In the first months of the war, there was plenty to observe, with the Germans overrunning Belgium and advancing on Paris. In the east, German aviators located the advancing Russian army, allowing commanders to move troops, and gave the outnumbered Germans an epic victory at Tannenberg. In the west, French aircraft returned to their base to report that the enemy's armies had made a fatal mistake and exposed their flank. This allowed the French to turn the tide and doomed Europe to 4 long years of trench warfare. From 1915, photography replaced sketches and notes as a technique for aerial reconnaissance. Aircraft with unwieldy box cameras were sent out day after day over the front to take photographs of the endless trenches and gun emplacements. With freezing fingers, observers hung over the sides of their ship in gale-like slipstreams to get a shot at the enemy below. The job was unglamorous and dangerous. The aircraft had to fly straight and steady, making it an inviting target from ground fire and eventually other armed aircraft. In addition to observation, early warbirds began to drop bombs on the enemy. At first, the bombs were nothing more than hand grenades and converted artillery shells, but soon this was refined to projectiles capable of destroying factories and railroads. By 1917, sturdier specialized bombers began to appear with bomb racks and bomb sights. Raids were carried out in daylight when air superiority allowed it, and at night when it did not. By the end of the war, aircraft roamed the front, bombing bridges and airfields and strafing troops, proving that the airplane had made the battlefield three-dimensional. The third use of the plane in war was as an attack aircraft. Generals, the only reason to place guns on an airplane was to protect the reconnaissance aircraft. But for the pilots and observers, it was a means to have a go at the other fellow. The first recorded aerial victory occurred on October 5, 1914, when a French pusher aircraft downed a German aviatik. For the most part, firing pistols and flares had limited effect on a foe traveling at 90 miles an hour. Mounting machine guns on their aircraft would change all that. Dutch designer Anthony Fokker created a propeller interrupter that allowed a forward-mounted machine gun to be placed on a German Eindecker monoplane, thus creating the first true fighter plane. It was so effective and took such a horrific toll on Allied aircraft that the British called it the Fokker Scourge. By 1916, fighter planes were being grouped in squadrons as tactics were developed for fighting formations, and a new breed of warrior was born: the fighter pilot. As members of Flight Section 62, Max Immelmann and Oswald Volka were among the first pilots to receive the Fokker Eindecker. Immelmann's exploits in the skies over the Western Front made him a national hero. His dominance over Allied airmen was cut short when he was killed in June 1916, when a faulty interrupter fluid caused him to blow off his own propeller. Max's greatest legacy was a tricky maneuver called the Immelmann turn, a move that is still a crowd thriller at modern air shows. Immelman's student and replacement was Oswald Bulka, who is considered to be the father of the dogfight. Bulka argued for the grouping of hand-picked pilots in fighter squadrons, or Jagdschwaben. As the leader of Jasta II, he passed his knowledge on to many of Germany's greatest flyers, including Manfred von Richthofen. Bulka also set down the principles of combat known as Bulka's Dicta. Some of these rules stated that pilots should attack from behind and out of the sun, fire only at close range, and when attacked from above, turn and face the enemy. These tactics are still used today. In the fall of 1916, he shot down 21 Allied aircraft in 2 months, increasing his total to 40. As with most of the great aces of the war, his luck ran out. On October 28, 1916, during a fierce dogfight, he collided with another German aircraft and spiraled to Earth and his death. In a world of great aviators, the greatest hunter of the skies was a charming and humorous Prussian, known to his admiring foes simply as the Red Baron.
Fight on and fly on to the last drop of blood and the last drop of fuel, to the last beat of the heart. Manfred von Richthofen.
Baron Manfred von Richthofen transferred from the Prussian cavalry to the air service in 1915. Having flown as an observer and a bomber pilot in the East, he was chosen by Bulka to join his Jasta in France. Eventually, he was given command of Jasta 11. Because of its garishly colored machines, the British soon christened the unit Richthofen's Flying Circus. Having survived a head wound during a dogfight in July 1917, Richthofen was pressured by his superiors to withdraw from combat. He was so beloved by the German people that it was felt by the Kaiser that his death would be a crushing blow to German morale. In spite of this concern, during the 1918 spring offensive, he climbed back into the cockpit. On April 21st, the Red Baron's reign of terror came to an end when he was shot through the heart while pursuing a British Sapling. Whether he was shot by an Australian machine gun or Canadian pilot Lloyd Brown is still debated. He came down behind Allied lines and was buried with full military honors by the enemy he terrorized. His final victory total was 80 Allied aircraft destroyed. No other pilot would reach that total until World War II. These men were part of a rare breed, soldiers who fought one-on-one, far above the stench and carnage in the trenches below. No matter how they died, to a generation they were the equivalent of the Knights of the Round Table. Their exploits and lessons set the stage for a new generation of German knights. On 11 November 1918, after 4 years of costly and fruitless war, Imperial Germany had little choice but to accept an armistice. The Allies were determined to prevent a German resurgence. The armistice proposals were harsh, not least in terms of German air power. According to Clause 4, Germany was to surrender in good condition 1,700 fighting and bombing aeroplanes, including all Fokker D-7 fighters and the entire night bombing fleet. By 12 December 1918, the new Republican government in Berlin announced that it had complied, but according to